Welcome back, everyone. In this video, I want to talk about this pattern that we implemented for our reducer, using this discriminating union type in order to type this action that this reducer receives. Just to go over, this discriminating union type is a union type of all of the different action types that can come in as the action argument that this reducer will respond to. The problem with doing this pattern, and it's a very common pattern, you will see this throughout many different TypeScript-enabled Redux applications. The problem is that even though we as developers are saying, okay, this reducer only responds to these action types, Redux doesn't only pass these action types to the reducer. Redux, as we know, passes every single action type to the reducer. Whenever an action dispatches, they go to every single reducer. So even though for us in our code, we know that for this reducer, we only want to respond to these three different actions. In reality, when all of this compiles down to JavaScript in the end, Redux is still going to dispatch all the actions, and there's no type guards that's preventing any of the actions that don't match this discriminating union from coming in. So we have an interesting path down this. Here, we know that there is value that we get from typing out this action, because now we know that based on what code we're implementing inside, this payload, for example, must be category, because by the time that our code can pass this case statement of fetch category success, the action must be fetch category success. We get that benefit through using our TypeScript types. But in order to retain that, we do lose some of the actual reality of our code. For example, if I were to comment out this default return state, first of all, you'll notice that this is not throwing an error. In fact, even if we explicitly tell this reducer to return category state, notice how this is not an issue. We don't get this type error that we're not returning when any action does not pass these types. Now you might be wondering, well, Yihua, why is that happening? The reason for this is that TypeScript is inferring that this reducer will only receive these three action types. And inside of your code, you have created a case for all three of these action types, and they're all returning a state object, and they're still returning category state type out of this reducer. So TypeScript thinks that you've actually covered every possible case that this reducer can receive. But we know that's not true. There are a bunch of actions that fire, whether it be the ones that are not within category action, or maybe it's the init action that Redux actually fires on initialization. Maybe it's these different actions such as Redux persist rehydrate that we've seen before from our middleware. All of these actions pass through these reducers. And again, the way that Redux determines that this does not need to be re-rendered is through this default return. But now our code no longer is protected from it. In fact, if we come here, what we see is that we do not have categories because it returned undefined. Ignore this for now, this is a type error. But here you'll notice that the error itself says the slice reducer for key categories returned undefined during initialization. And the reason for that is that init action got fired when Redux first mounted. That init action passes in as an action. It sees that inside the switch statement, there is no default fall through, so nothing happens. Undefined gets returned. That becomes the state slice for this categories reducer. So this is where this code is problematic. So what we need to do is we actually need to modify our reducer utils with something that allows us to be more diligent in the actual matching. And this is known as type guards. So the way that we can do this is inside of our reducer utils. We need to create some way for us to actually match these actions directly on the type itself. So the type value needs to be something that we can leverage in order to check in our reducer rather than passing this discriminating union. So we know we can get any action. The thing though is that despite getting any action, we only want our code to respond to specific actions. So how do we do that? Well, this is where we're going to create something known as a matchable. A matchable type is a type that we ourselves implement. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to extend all of these different action creator functions with an ability to match the received action by the type that this action creator is associated to. This action creator, we know, returns back this specific type, with this category's action type fetch category start as the type that this action creator represents. So when we receive an action, we want to leverage this function to do a check. And the way we do that is we're actually going to attach a method on this action creator. So what we're going to do first is let me show you what I mean. Any function, regardless of what it is, let's say myfunc, and this is equal to some function that runs console.log hit. Here you can run myfunc, and what you'll see is a console logs hit. In JavaScript though, almost everything is an object, especially a function. That means that we can actually attach additional methods on here. I can say my function.match is equal to a function that runs console.log hat. And now I can still run my func as a function by itself. You'll see that we log hit. But what I can also do is I can run my func.match and it'll log hat. So it does not stop my func from being a function. It just extends the ability for us to add different methods on top of it. And this is what we're going to do. We are going to leverage the fact that in JavaScript, everything is an object to attach additional properties on our action creators so that they can behave also as action type guards. So I'm going to talk about how we do that in the next video. But the main idea I want you to understand is why we need it. And again, the reason why is because this reducer is assuming that all the actions coming through are going to be one of these three types. But in reality, it's actually not that case. As we saw, Redux initialization, middleware passes all these different actions. There's lots of different actions that might fire. And even though we might have this default return state, we still want TypeScript to be accurate, meaning that if this gets removed, we want there to be an actual error of some kind, meaning that we haven't handled anything. So that's what we need to do. And let's do that in the next video.